A former Trump ambassador is sounding the alarm about Trump's upcoming talks with Vladimir Putin. Friday's meeting about the Russia-Ukraine war is scheduled for a military base in Alaska. Reportedly, Trump and Putin are meeting one-on-one with just their translators present. Financial Times reporting today on experts who say Trump's purges have ousted top Russian analysts. Ex-Trump ambassador Eric Rubin saying, quote, "It's safe to say that Trump does not have a single policy-making person who knows Russia and Ukraine advising him." The last time Trump met one-on-one with Putin, he took his interpreter's notes and told him not to discuss the meeting with anyone, as he concealed details even from, quote, officials within his own administration. A year later in Helsinki, Trump infamously threw U.S. intelligence under the bus, siding with Putin over Russian election interference.
Who do you believe?
I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Today, Trump saying Putin will face, quote, severe consequences if he doesn't agree to stop the war after Friday's meeting, but declining to say what those consequences actually are. The New York Times' Peter Baker asking, quote, is Trump ready to put serious pressure on his Russian counterpart? Will Mr. Putin again win over the president to his way of thinking? Or is their friendship really on the rocks? Joining me now is Katty Kay, U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC News and an MSNBC contributor. Thank you so much, Katty, for joining us this evening. So I'll start with this. I'm famous for saying, I say this all the time, I don't care about court intrigue. I don't care about personal relationships. I never thought that Trump and Putin were friends. But it does seem very clear that Putin has directly lied to President Trump multiple times in one-on-one meetings. So going into this next one-on-one meeting, do you think there will be more hostility and less trust because what's happened in the past?
Look, so I think President Trump goes into this having expressed more frustration with Vladimir Putin than we've seen in previous encounters, right, Jason? So he has set the tone for possibly saying, OK, we're going to have certain conditions coming out of this. The question is whether, as Peter Baker says, what are the consequences if Russia doesn't stick to those conditions? And then I think importantly, are those conditions measurable? I mean, does he go into the meeting and say, OK, look, we actually do need to see that you are not attacking energy infrastructure, or we do need to see that you are not attacking civilian infrastructure, and then measure Vladimir Putin against those results? That would probably be quite a positive outcome from this conference. It's interesting that a lot of people around the world, particularly in Europe, were alarmed enough about the prospect of Donald Trump walking in one-on-one with Vladimir Putin without the kind of usual process of having had the National Security Council or the State Department negotiate the grounds and the terms beforehand, that they summoned this emergency meeting. I mean, they were alarmed, right? Clearly, that kind of emergency meeting doesn't normally happen. So I think people are feeling a little reassured this evening that at least he listened to the European perspective, he listened to the Ukrainian perspective. But then the question is, what does Vladimir Putin do to try to woo back Donald Trump? What does he offer him to try and woo him back into that kind of friendship that Peter's talking about?
Now, this is a key thing here. President Trump, after his first term, when he was out of power, he basically hollowed the Republican Party out of any actual experts when it comes to Russia, when it comes to Soviet. He didn't want anyone around who would tell him no. The only person in his administration that might understand anything about this is Marco Rubio, who he sidelined. Melania might actually know more about Russia and Eastern Bloc companies than anybody who's actually in his administration. Is it possible, despite listening to the Europeans, Trump doesn't even know what ground rules to set? Because it's not like he necessarily knows what's at stake. Is he even capable of setting standards with Putin when he's so uninformed?
Look, I don't think anyone would say that Donald Trump was fascinated by details of foreign policy or domestic policy necessarily, right? He wants the win. He wants the deal. Right. He wants the meeting. And I think it's been really interesting to watch the White House over the last couple of days lower expectations for this. I mean, Donald Trump went into this suggesting almost that he had the deal and the Nobel Prize was going to come the next day. That's changed significantly. I mean, we've heard it from Caroline Levitt. We've heard her saying this is in listening mode. I think there has been a realization that he's going into this meeting and may not come out with the big deal that he had been hoping to get out of it. And then I think the question is, what is the point of the meeting? Does the meeting help the situation in Ukraine, or does the meeting actually hurt the situation in Ukraine? Does Vladimir Putin manage to say to Donald Trump, look, there's all these business opportunities for the United States, for the Trump family in Russia? Does he kind of bring him back to the table that way? Does he kind of bamboozle him with flattery? And does Trump get back to his natural state, which seems to be an admiration for Vladimir Putin coming out of this meeting? And that's what the concern is about not having those experts around. The reason you want the experts around is because you want people around who understand the detail, who understand the complications, who understand the what ifs, rather than thinking this can be just done by two men and the feeling that they have in the course of that meeting. Because we know that Vladimir Putin is a master at somehow making Donald Trump feel that they are friends or people who should just do business together. And that's clearly not the situation here.
And quickly here, the fact that this meeting is taking place with President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and Zelensky is not involved, do you think that makes it more or less likely that any deal actually occurs? Because you're basically setting this up to look like the U.S. versus Russia and the Ukraine on the side, even though the Ukraine war is the reason the meeting's happening.
Well, the interesting thing that came out of that meeting with the Europeans is they do seem to agree to a set of 5 principles, which include Ukraine having a say in any territorial discussions and in any ceasefire negotiations that might lead to a territorial discussion. So I don't see a meeting coming up between Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. Putin seems to have huge disdain for Zelensky, but I do think the Europeans at least feel they've got Ukraine at the table, which is as much probably as they can expect at the moment.